My name is Madison Keene. They called it useless doodling. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth. Now get in the mood to listen to this story because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. At first, I didn't think it mattered. I would sit at my desk pulling out little napkins, sticky notes, or the back of printed reports and draw. Not because I wanted anyone to see, it was just the only thing that kept me breathing when the world felt too tight. My fingers would curl around a pen and forget that I was being ignored in meetings, that my name was never mentioned when credit was given, or that my husband hadn't looked at me properly in years. My boss once walked past my desk and smirked at my sketch of a lopsided cat in a tutu. Still with the cartoons, Madison, he chuckled. You really ought to grow out of that. Then he patted me on the shoulder like I was 12. That was the first moment I started drawing her the cat with attitude. Big eyes, one missing ear, sharp claws. I named her Miss Clawford. No one knew I'd been secretly building an entire universe of these oddball characters. A one-legged penguin chef, a gossiping snail, a sad clown cactus. They all lived in my mind, ridiculous maybe, but they were mine. My husband Brad was even worse. You waste so much time, he said one evening as I sat at the kitchen table sketching a flamingo in boxing gloves. Why not put that energy into something useful like dinner? Useful. He always had a way of turning the knife without raising his voice. I'd been laid off 6 months earlier and picked up a part-time admin job just to cover groceries. He was still working at the same tech firm now in management, and with each new raise his patience for my little hobbies shrank like wet paper. That night I left my sketchbook out by accident. The next morning it was in the trash. Pages ripped. Doodles torn down the middle. It was cluttering the table, Brad muttered, sipping his coffee, not even looking at me. I don't remember what I said. Probably nothing. That was how I survived back then, by saying nothing. I had learned that my silence kept things peaceful, but silence comes with a cost. And I was racking up quite the debt. That was when I began scanning my drawings at the library, emailing them to myself secretly, just in case. I'd sketch during my lunch break at the office in the break room where no one talked to me except the vending machine. I'd post a few to a barely followed Instagram I made under the name The Napkin Zoo. No one cared. Not then. Except for one day, a Tuesday. I still remember because the sky was that heavy gray that makes even fresh laundry feel damp. I was sitting at the park across from the office eating a sad sandwich and drawing a snail with sunglasses. A woman in her 30s stopped while walking her dog. "That's adorable," she said. I looked up, startled. "Oh, thank you," I mumbled, ready to fold the sketch away. "Do you sell those?" That question echoed in my mind for days. Not "Are you an artist?" Not "Do you work in design?" But "Do you sell those?" I went home and made an Etsy shop. I called it Miss Clawford and Friends. I scanned 10 of my characters and turned them into digital prints. I priced them at $5. No one bought anything. For 2 months. Then one day, a notification buzzed on my phone. One order received. I stared at it for a full minute, thinking it was a mistake. Someone, a stranger named Melanie from Portland, had bought Miss Clawford Does Taxes, a doodle of my cat, wearing a suit surrounded by burning spreadsheets. I wept. I actually wept. For $5. Brad found me crying and rolled his eyes. What now? I didn't answer. Because I realized something he didn't, that $5 meant someone saw value in me. Not because they had to. Not out of pity. Not out of obligation. A total stranger chose me, or at least my weird, jagged, ridiculous scribble. And from that moment on, I knew this wasn't just doodling anymore. It was going to save my life. The night he shredded my sketchbook, something inside me quietly died. I'd just come home from a long shift. The fluorescent lighting at the office had made my head ache, and the scent of microwave noodles was still clinging to my coat. I walked into our apartment and found Brad sitting on the couch watching reruns of Shark Tank, legs spread like a king on his throne. The moment I stepped into the kitchen, I noticed the trash bag bulging near the door. I pulled it open and froze. Pages. Torn. Folded. Smeared. My sketchbook, the one I'd been hiding in the cabinet behind the cereal boxes, was in pieces like someone had destroyed a part of my brain and thrown it out with the eggshells. "What is this?" I asked, my voice trembling, holding up one page with a drawing of a crying octopus sipping tea. Brad didn't even mute the TV. It was garbage. "I told you to stop leaving that junk everywhere." It wasn't junk. It looked like stuff a kid draws in detention. He gave me a look that made me feel microscopic. "Grow up, Madison." I walked back to the kitchen, shut the trash bag, and didn't say a word. That night, I curled up in the guest room and stared at the ceiling. Something new started pulsing in my chest. Not sadness, not even anger. Something colder. Sharper. I opened my email and looked at the digital copies I'd saved weeks ago. Miss Clawford stared back at me with her usual unimpressed smirk. And in that moment, I realized Brad couldn't destroy the originals anymore, because the real versions lived inside me and in my files. He didn't know it, but he'd set the fire under my feet. The next morning, I left a sticky note on the fridge: "I'll be gone a few hours. Grocery run." Also, I quit the pity. I didn't even know what that meant when I wrote it. But I meant every word. I went straight to the public library and applied for a makerspace pass. They had a scanner, a shared iPad, and old software that let me play with basic formatting. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. Every scanned doodle came alive again, brighter, crisper, truer. I borrowed a beat-up laptop from the community lending center and took it to my admin job. At lunch, I didn't just sketch anymore, I formatted. Cleaned up outlines, built simple listings, added cheesy descriptions like, "Miss Clawford is the cat who rolls her eyes harder than you do during staff meetings." Within a week, I had a collection of 15 character prints on my Etsy page. No sales, still nothing. But I wasn't the same Madison anymore. I wasn't waiting to be seen. I was building in secret, like someone digging her way out of a prison with a spoon. Then came her, Heather, the new receptionist at the office. She was young, 20-something, and had the kind of blunt honesty only Gen Z could weaponize, and still sound charming. One day, she caught me sketching at the copier. "Oh my God, is that an anxious potato in a cape?" she said, pointing at my scribble. I blushed. Yeah. His name's Spudman. He has chronic imposter syndrome but still saves cats." Heather laughed so hard she almost dropped her iced coffee. "You need to post that," she said. "Seriously, this could be a brand." "Like, emotional support weirdos?" I blinked. Emotional support weirdos. That phrase rolled around in my head for days. That night, I updated my Etsy shop title. "Emotional Support Weirdos" by Miss Clawford and Friends. The next day, I posted Spudman on Instagram with a caption, "For anyone saving the world while questioning their self-worth. I see you." And something wild happened. I got 11 likes, then 30. Then a comment from someone saying, "This is literally me in vegetable form." It wasn't viral, not even close, but it was oxygen. Real humans connecting with my strange little friends. I started waking up at 5 a.m. to draw before work. I skipped lunch to reply to comments. And every time Brad sighed or made some sarcastic remark like still chasing the kitty crayon dream, I nodded and said nothing. Because soon my dream wouldn't just be mine. It would be something they couldn't ignore. The morning Brad left, he didn't even say goodbye. No slammed doors. No dramatic argument. Just a post-it note on the fridge that read, "Took the Jeep. Need space. You can handle the bills this month." And a grocery list beneath it like he'd still expected me to go shopping. Eggs, milk chicken thighs, paper towels. I stood in the kitchen barefoot, staring at the stupid yellow square for what felt like an hour. I thought, this is it. Years of marriage. and all I get is a checklist and silence. The bank app confirmed the rest. My name had been quietly removed from our joint accounts. I had $213 in mine and a rent payment due in 4 days. There was no dramatic breakdown, no tears. I just stood there frozen, realizing that every safety net I thought I had was gone. Brad didn't just walk out of our apartment, he walked out of the illusion that we were partners. He saw me as dead weight. Background noise. A placeholder wife until something better came along. But here's the thing about being underestimated, it can become your greatest weapon. I made coffee, sat on the worn-out sofa, and looked at my sketchbook, the new one. The one I'd started after he tore up the last. I stared at Miss Clawford, now redrawn with bolder lines and a sharper expression, lounging atop a stack of unpaid bills. I drew a speech bubble plot twist. I was the asset all along. I posted it to Instagram. The caption read, "When your ex thinks he left you with nothing but you've got unmatched energy, unpaid rage, and a marker that never runs dry." It was a throwaway post, but by the end of the day, it had over 300 likes. That night, I got a DM from someone named Jules, who ran a mental health and burnout recovery blog. They asked if they could share my characters in a feature post. For the first time in what felt like years, someone wanted to include me, not out of pity, but because my voice meant something. I said yes. Desperation is a strange kind of fuel. It's bitter, but it burns hot. I picked up extra hours at the admin job, stayed late cleaning the copy room just to earn a bit more. But during every lunch, every train ride, every minute between sleep and waking, I drew. The Anxious Potato became a series. I gave him a girlfriend, a nervous celery named Nell. I started turning them into stickers using the library's craft cutter. It wasn't glamorous. I packed each one by hand, wrote personal notes, used old envelopes from the junk drawer, but I mailed out my first 5 Etsy orders that week. I'll never forget the moment my phone buzzed with an Etsy review. "This made me laugh during the worst week of my life. Thank you for creating these odd, comforting weirdos." I cried. Again. Not because I was sad, because for once someone saw the weird part of me and didn't run. Then something small but wild happened. A popular self-help Instagram account reposted my Miss Clawford comic. They tagged me. Suddenly, I had 700 new followers. Etsy orders spiked. I sold out of the stickers by 2 p.m. I had to take the store offline just to catch my breath. But it wasn't the sales that hit me hardest. It was a message from someone I hadn't heard from in years. My sister. "Madison saw your art on IG. So cute. Always knew you'd do something creative. We should catch up sometime." My thumb hovered over the reply button. Because no, she didn't always believe in me. She'd laughed at my sketches when I showed her years ago, called them fun little distractions. She'd told me I was wasting my degree. She'd introduced Brad to her college roommate, now his space apparently. I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I sat down with a Sharpie and drew a new piece. Miss Clawford in a crown, standing on a pile of broken clocks and ripped-up Post-its. Caption: "When time, doubt, and petty people tried to bury you, but you bloomed anyway." I printed it, framed it, hung it above my tiny desk. Because from that moment on, I wasn't just surviving. I was building with every scribble they called ridiculous. I took the desk job because I had no choice. It was at a packaging company, fluorescent lights, cheap coffee, dusty filing cabinets. I was overqualified, underpaid, and invisible. They hired me to fill the gap until they found someone permanent, which meant I was treated like a ghost that stapled things. No one cared that I had a design degree, or that I once interned for a boutique brand that got acquired. All they saw was a quiet woman in thrift store flats who smiled too much and knew how to fix the printer. Every day I sat at the far end of the office near the supply closet. My desk was wedged between a blinking router and a broken mini fridge that smelled faintly like forgotten yogurt. The only decoration I had was a paperclip sculpture I made during a meeting no one invited me to. But I brought my sketchbook anyway. I sketched when no one was looking during breaks between emails on the back of shipping receipts. It was the only part of my day that made sense. I'd draw Miss Clawford fending off productivity pirates or Spudman curling into a baked potato at the sight of the calendar. Every character I created had a little bit of me inside them. Burnt out, trying hard, still showing up. One afternoon, I was hunched over my sketchbook when my supervisor, Kevin, walked by. He was the kind of man who used words like synergy and value proposition without ever saying anything useful. He paused at my desk, eyeing the drawing of an overworked bee with a cracked coffee mug. He smirked. "Still doing the cartoon thing, huh?" I nodded without looking up. He tapped the side of my cubicle. "Maybe someday you'll grow out of that." Then he walked off to eat a sad sandwich and take credit for someone else's spreadsheet. It hurt. But it also lit something, because he reminded me exactly why I was drawing in the first place. That evening, I went home, turned off my phone, and didn't speak to anyone. I just drew. For hours. My hand cramped, my eyes blurred, and my kitchen table was covered in crumpled paper by midnight. I designed 5 new characters: Morty, the meltdown mushroom who cried when deadlines changed; Fern, the forgetful fox who misplaced her glasses constantly; Dottie, the depressed dragon who lit fires accidentally when anxious; Gary, the passive-aggressive goat who left sticky notes everywhere; Ziggy, the overthinking zebra who had a black and white spiral for a mane. I scanned them, cleaned the outlines, colored each one, uploaded them to my Etsy. Then I did something terrifying. I posted a reel. Just a sped-up clip of me sketching Miss Clawford in a coffee shop with music playing, and the caption, "This cat helped me survive my worst year. Meet Miss Clawford." I went to bed sick with anxiety. When I woke up, the reel had 2,000 views. By lunch, it had 18,000. By dinner, 53,000 tolerant. Orders started rolling in. Slowly at first, 2 sticker sets, then a print. Then a bundle of all 5 characters bought by someone in Ohio with a note that read, "Thank you for making characters that understand me better than people do." That was the night I realized I didn't just have doodles. I had language for people who didn't know how to explain themselves. A silent, silly vocabulary for burnout, grief, invisibility, and quiet strength. I was building something more than a shop. I was building a world. I was building something more than a shop. I was building a world. A world where people like me weren't ridiculed for being soft, odd, sensitive, or slow to bloom. A world where anxiety could wear sunglasses and still be cool. A world where the characters didn't get better, they just showed up every day trying. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was showing up too. The next morning at work, Kevin asked me to alphabetize 5 boxes of client forms. I did it smiling the whole time because I'd made $74 in Etsy sales overnight, more than half my day's wage at the office. While I filed papers, I imagined Miss Clawford skating over spreadsheets, slicing through the red tape. I thought about Spudman and Ziggy sitting beside me in that gray cubicle, sipping imaginary tea and whispering, "This isn't your forever." And for the first time, I believed them. Later that day, Heather, the only person in the office under 30, peeked into my cubicle with her phone. "Dude," she said, holding up her screen. "You're trending." My heart stuttered. "What?" "Some mental health account reposted your reel. It's getting shared like crazy. People are tagging their friends like, 'This is me every Monday morning.'" She scrolled through comments, grinning. "You're kind of becoming a thing." I laughed out of disbelief, not joy, yet not excitement. Just shock. Me. A thing. Heather pulled out a sticky note and scribbled something. "You need a domain name. And an email list. Don't let these people disappear." I nodded, stunned. "Okay. Yeah." Then she added, "Also Morty. The mushroom is my new emotional support animal." I bought 2 stickers. That night, I launched a simple site, emotionalsupportweirdos.com. It was clunky. Built from a free template. But it was mine. I stayed up until 3 a.m. packing orders. I had no printer, so I handwrote each address. I used washi tape from the dollar bin. I drew little hearts on each envelope, and on the inside, I included a note. If no one told you today, you matter. Also, you're not the only anxious potato out there. M. It sounds cheesy. Maybe it was. But every sticker I sent felt like another stitch holding me together. The next day, I came into work like usual. Coffee, clipboard, smile. Kevin didn't say good morning. He dropped a stack of papers on my desk and mumbled something about misfiled forms. I bit my tongue, nodded, and took the papers. As I watched him walk away, I imagined him as a character, a crow in a tie, squawking corporate buzzwords while stealing shiny ideas from other birds. I chuckled to myself and drew him that night. I named him Chadwick, the credit-stealing crow. People loved him, but even with the momentum, I was still scared. Scared the orders would dry up. Scared people would lose interest. Scared Brad would come back and twist everything I'd built into a joke. So I kept quiet, kept my head down, posted, drew, packed, rinse and repeat, until something wild happened. A small independent magazine reached out to interview me. The email subject was Emotional Support Weirdos, the internet's favorite new language for burnout. I reread the message 5 times before replying. The article came out 2 weeks later. It featured a photo of my stickers on a therapist's desk and a quote from me saying, "I think people connect with characters who look like how they feel inside, messy but trying." I didn't expect what came next. A mental health nonprofit offered to buy bulk sticker packs to hand out at support groups. A podcast reached out. A wellness subscription box wanted to feature my art. And right as the momentum began to build, Brad called. For the first time in months. But I'll tell you about that in part 5. Because this part of the story, this is where I stopped being just the girl at the office with doodles and daydreams, and started becoming someone who could change her whole life with a pen. The call came just after sunset when the light in my tiny apartment turned a soft gold and made the shadows look like they had secrets. I was packaging an order, a 10-sticker bundle for someone named Kelsey in Seattle. I had just written my usual note on the back of the thank you card. In case no one reminded you today, you're allowed to be weird, tired, and still valuable. Then my phone rang. Brad. I stared at the screen. My body reacted before my mind did, hand-freezing, throat-tightening, breath-shortening, like I'd just been caught doing something wrong. Old instincts. Years of walking on eggshells. I didn't want to answer, but I did. His voice was calm, too calm. "Hey, Maddie. Been a while." I didn't say anything. I saw your stuff online. These weird little characters. People seem to like them." He paused as if waiting for me to thank him for the compliment. I waited. Then he said, "So listen, I've been working on something, a business idea, and I thought maybe we could talk about it. Maybe partner up. You've got like visibility now." I stared at the wall. There was a crack above my light switch. I'd never noticed it before. "You want to use me?" I said quietly, after mocking me, shredding my work, and walking out with no explanation. "Now you want in." He laughed, awkward, forced. "Come on, Maddie. That was a long time ago. We weren't in a good place. You know that." "No," I said, voice low. "You weren't in a good place. I was just inconvenient." Silence. "Look," he said finally, "we could make good money together. You've got this artsy thing going, and I have a real sense for business." I hung up. I stood there, my chest vibrating with adrenaline. Then I did something I'd never done before, not when he insulted my art. Not when he ghosted me, not even when he cut me off financially. I let myself get angry. Not bitter, not vengeful. Angry. Because this man, This man who had reduced my dreams to dust and sticky notes thought he could just circle back now that I was becoming something, like I'd been waiting, like I was his asset to repurpose. I sat at my desk and pulled out a blank page. Then I drew Bradley the backpedaling bore with a Bluetooth earpiece, tiny sunglasses, and a briefcase full of other people's dreams. I posted it with a caption, "The kind of guy who laughs at your vision until it becomes valuable." I didn't name him. I didn't have to. The internet knew. That post went viral. 20K likes, 3,000 ton shares, dozens of comments like, "Oof, I know a Bradley." This hit me in the divorce court. "Why does this sticker look exactly like my ex? You should sell this. I'd slap it on my laptop tomorrow." So I did. I made a limited edition emotional saboteur sticker pack featuring Bradley the Boar Chadwick, the credit-stealing crow, and a new edition Penny, the performative pal, a peacock who only shows up when you're doing well. It sold out in 6 hours. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my messages. Among the usual DMs from supporters and customers, one stood out. It was from Melanie, the woman who bought my first ever digital print. She wrote, "Hey Madison, just wanted to say I still have Miss Clawford above my desk. Your art got me through a divorce and a job loss. Thank you for being unapologetically weird." I stared at the message. This wasn't just about art anymore. This was about proof that the thing I'd been mocked for, the thing Brad called a waste of time, was actually a lifeline for others. It was connection, comfort, a gentle rebellion wrapped in humor. I ended the night by designing a new piece. Miss Clawford standing at the top of a mountain made of broken coffee cups, rejection letters, and old sketchbooks. She wore a tiny golden crown, caption Queen of the You'll Never Make It Club, and below it, in small handwritten letters, "Turns out she did." I didn't mean to become a brand. I wasn't trying to be an entrepreneur. I didn't have a business plan, an MBA, or even a fancy font picked out for a logo. What I had were sketches. Raw, ridiculous, sometimes shaky. But mine. And slowly, those sketches were turning into something with momentum, something that didn't ask for permission anymore. But momentum is strange. It invites both admiration and imitation. And that's when I met Serena. She first appeared in the comments section of a viral post, then in my DMs. Then she ordered 3 sticker sets and posted an unboxing video on TikTok. "I love Madison's weird little universe," she gushed. "It's like therapy, but with monsters and sarcasm." Her energy was infectious, bright, sharp, with an aesthetic that screamed effortlessly cool. She had neon nails, blunt bangs, and a voice that made you feel like you were always in on a joke. Then she emailed me. "Let's talk collab." We hopped on a Zoom. She was all charisma and buzzwords. "Your brand is quirky affirmation. You're riding this amazing emotional satire wave. You just need scalability. Licensing. Merch lines. Maybe an agency?" I nodded slowly. I didn't understand half of what she was saying, but I understood what she wanted me to believe, that she could take my wonky little characters and turn them into a gold mine. "I don't want to change your voice," she said, sipping from a mug that said, "I manifested this. I just want to amplify it. I know people in publishing, book deals, Target collabs." She smiled with all her teeth. I felt flattered. I felt anxious. I felt something was off. We did one collab, a limited run of emotional saboteur notebooks she printed and sold under her boutique's name. The artwork was mine. Her logo was slapped in the corner. They sold out in 2 days. But when the revenue report came in, the numbers didn't add up. She said, "Oh, I had to factor in design time and marketing. You know, my brand equity helped push it." I stared at her invoice. She'd charged me for creative visioning and social influencer leverage. I'd received $212.50 from over 400 units sold. I didn't respond. I just pulled out a notepad and drew a new character, feral foxes in flower crowns, cute, but carnivorous. Then I made my own notebook version, no collab, no middlewoman. I named it the Betrayal Binder. Each page had one of my creatures and an affirmation that dripped with truth. You're not too much. They're just too little. You can outgrow someone and still be kind. Let them think you're losing, then win slowly. I sold 100 copies in 48 hours. All profits were mine. Serena reached out again, bubbly as ever. Let's do a spring line. I have mood boards. Mushroom core meets rage core. I replied with one sentence. I'm building my own ecosystem now. She sent a thumbs up emoji. Then not long after, I saw a new product launch on her boutique's page, a line of pastel monsters with handwritten affirmations. The style was eerily familiar. The slogans, almost word for word from my earliest designs. I didn't sue. I didn't name drop. I did what I always do. I created. This time, it was the copycat parade, a line of characters who mimicked everything around them, hoping no one would notice they had no soul of their own. The caption: some ideas are born, some are borrowed, some are stolen and sold with a discount code. My audience exploded. They knew. They rallied. This was the moment I realized something vital. My value wasn't in the art itself, it was in the voice behind it. They could mimic the lines, but not the pulse, not the lived grief and quiet rebellion baked into every doodle. Because this wasn't just branding, it was my survival story told in sarcasm, sketchlines, and emotional fingerprints. And no influencer with a mood board could ever replicate that. When I launched the Copycat Parade collection, I expected a few supportive comments. What I didn't expect was Etsy crashing. I'd listed 500 units. They sold out in under 2 hours. My inbox turned into a war zone of requests, questions, commissions. People were emailing, DMing, and even commenting on old posts begging me to restock. It was chaos. It was beautiful. I sat in my tiny apartment surrounded by sticker sheets and packing tape, shaking with something that felt like joy but edged in disbelief. For the first time in my life, people weren't just watching me survive, they were investing in it. Then came the message, from a number I hadn't seen in almost 3 years. Hey, just saw your stuff is blowing up. Proud of you. Hope we can talk. It was from Megan, my sister. The same sister who once told me to get serious and stop wasting time doodling like a teenager. The one who told our mom that my art was just a phase. Who rolled her eyes when I said I was going to sell my own designs. I stared at the text like it was written in code. Because the last time we spoke, she'd laughed when I showed her my first online shop. Now here she was, proud of me. I didn't reply, not because I was angry, but because I didn't know who she was anymore. I didn't know if she was proud of me or proud of the numbers. A few days later, I got a tagged post notification. She'd uploaded a picture of my sticker set arranged on her desk next to a $9 matcha and a curated flat lay of aesthetic stationery. Caption: so proud of my baby sis killing the art game, support small businesses. And that was when I felt the burn. Not of betrayal, but of co-option. Because that sticker set, she hadn't bought it. She had taken it from a box I left at Mom's house months ago as a backup sample. I recognized the crease on the corner. That box was marked, not for sale. She hadn't supported me. She'd just supported her image. I opened my sketchpad. A new creature appeared, glitter ghoul, bright, sparkly, and hollow inside. Mouth shaped like a heart. Eyes empty. I released it 2 days later. It came with a caption: they'll pretend they helped you build it, but they only showed up when the camera did. I didn't name her, but I didn't need to. The comments poured in. Ugh. My sister too. Is this about that influencer cousin I have? Every artist knows this person. Sales spiked again. But the emotional fallout came that night. I sat in the dark, the glow of my phone lighting my bare walls. I'd hit 10,000 followers. People were reposting my designs. I was even getting messages from small press publishers. But in the silence, I felt the shape of what I'd lost. I missed the sister who used to braid my hair before school, who once drew cartoons with me when we were kids, who stole my markers but hugged me tight when I cried. I missed someone who might never have existed. Or maybe she did. Before the world taught her that clout matters more than connection. I didn't block her. I didn't confront her. Instead, I posted something that wasn't a creature. It was a handwritten note torn from my old sketchbook. It read, "Not everyone grows with you, and that's okay. Grieve it. Don't chase it." It got more likes than any post before it, because it wasn't art, it was truth. And the next morning, a new email hit my inbox. Subject line: licensing inquiry, retail collaboration, the sender Target. The email from Target didn't feel real. At first, I thought it was spam. I almost deleted it. Subject: licensing opportunity, character brand collaboration sender corporate partnerships Target HQ. I clicked. Read it, reread it, then just sat there. They wanted to license a selection of my characters for a seasonal retail collection. Stickers, mugs, planners, maybe even apparel. In stores, nationwide. There was a line near the end of the email that made my vision blur. Your characters tap into the emotional core of modern burnout in a voice that is both humorous and heartbreakingly sincere. We see mass potential. Mass potential. Those words rang in my head like a bell. It wasn't just cute. It wasn't just quirky. Someone out there, someone with power, had understood me. I didn't scream. I didn't even smile. I just walked to my kitchen, sat on the cold tile floor, and let the tears fall. Because I remembered every moment people had not seen me. Every time I'd been told to get a real job. Every email that went unanswered. Every friend who stopped inviting me out because I couldn't afford a meal. Every piece of art I crumpled and threw away because I thought no one would care. And now they wanted to put my scribbles on store shelves. I called no one. Not Megan. Not my mom. Not even the friend who once paid for my groceries when I had $2 in my account. I called my lawyer. Because if I'd learned anything from this journey, it was this: do not let the joy make you forget your worth. We negotiated. There were Zoom calls, contracts, mock-ups. I fought to keep creative control. I argued for accurate character representation. I turned down the first offer, then the second. I could feel them testing me, wondering if I was just some lucky artist who'd fold at the first check. But I didn't, because I wasn't lucky. I was feral, and I knew exactly what it had cost me to get here. The deal closed 3 months later. Advance payment, royalties, co-branded credit on all products, and my name, my actual name, printed on every tag. Not designed by studio, not sourced by team, but mine. I posted a photo of the signed contract with one caption: I kept the receipts. Now I'm printing them. I remember walking into the store the day the first products dropped. It was a rainy Tuesday. No fanfare. No cameras. I found the aisle quietly, looked down the row, and there she was, Miss Clawford printed on a spiral notebook next to mugs with Spudman and tote bags with Morty. I picked one up, ran my hand over the print. There was a mom nearby with a daughter maybe 12 years old holding up the same notebook. Look, the girl said, pointing at Miss Clawford. She's like me at school. The mom chuckled. We should get it. The girl hugged the notebook to her chest, and I felt it again. That ache. That impossible ache of being seen. That night, I went home and drew something new. Not a character, not a ghoul or mushroom or overworked fox. Just a mirror, cracked, repaired, framed in gold leaf. And beneath it, these words: this brand was built from broken things. That's why it shines the way it does. Success didn't feel like a parade. It felt like silence, a deeper silence than failure. When I used to lie awake wondering how I'd pay rent, every creak in the wall felt like a scream. Now the nights were soft, quiet. I didn't have to worry anymore. But oddly, I also didn't know what to want anymore. I had money, stability, followers. My art was in people's homes, kids decorating lunchboxes with Spudman therapists quoting Morty on Instagram. But something was missing. Then I got a letter. Not an email. A real letter. It came in a pale blue envelope hand-addressed. No return label. Inside was a folded sheet of lined paper covered in slightly smudged pencil handwriting. Hi, I'm not sure you'll ever read this, but I wanted to tell you. Your sticker saved me. Not in a cheesy way. Not in a, I was about to give up and then saw your art way. But in a quieter way. I bought the Morty sticker, the one that says, I'm tired, not lazy. I stuck it on my laptop. And every time my boss made a comment about me not pulling my weight because of my anxiety, I looked at that sticker and remembered, I'm not broken. I'm human. I'm applying for a new job now, one where they treat people like people. Thank you for helping me remember I'm worth something. I cried because I realized something. I hadn't just made art. I'd made language for people who didn't know how to explain what they were feeling. That's when the idea hit me. Not a product, not a post, a place, an actual space where artists like me, the misfits, the weirdos, the emotional ones, could create without shame. I called it the Scribble House. It started as a joke in a caption. One day I'll open a studio where people can cry into beanbags, draw angry mushrooms, and drink overpriced cocoa. Just you wait. I didn't expect the comments to explode. People begging me to make it real. So I did. I leased a small storefront in a quiet part of town. Clean white walls, high ceilings, nothing fancy. I painted one wall chalkboard black and wrote across it in big white script, ugly feelings make beautiful things. Inside there were couches, shelves of sketch pads, a corner for zine swaps. We held sticker-making workshops. People came in sometimes just to sit, to feel safe, to belong. And slowly, something happened. I watched them come back, week after week, with their own creatures, characters, scribbles. A girl who drew anxious frogs, a man in his 50s sketching thunderclouds with eyes, a non-binary teen who made a whole deck of emotional tarot using trash cans and raccoons. It became more than a studio. It became a home. Megan showed up one day, unannounced. She walked in quietly, sunglasses pushed up into her hair, holding a small box. Inside were old sketchbooks. Mine, ones I thought were lost. She found them at Mom's, apparently, stuffed in the back of a closet. I figured you might want these, she said. And for the first time in years, we talked. Really talked. She admitted she was jealous, that she didn't understand what I was trying to do back then. That it scared her to see me choosing an uncertain path because she didn't have the courage to choose one herself. I didn't forgive her that day, but I heard her. And maybe that was enough to start something new. That night, I opened one of the sketchbooks. Inside was a drawing from when I was 16. A tiny, ridiculous blob with eyes too big and arms too small. I'd scribbled a caption under it. One day you'll pay to see me. I laughed so hard I cried. Because it was true. Success didn't feel like a parade. It felt like a quiet room you walk into after years of shouting into the void, and finally, the void whispers back. I wasn't used to this kind of quiet. No dread clamping my stomach. No emergency bill hovering over my shoulder. No crushing silence after posting a drawing that took all night and hearing nothing. Now I posted and the comments came in waves. Orders rolled in before I could finish restocking. My name was starting to pop up in places I never imagined: art blogs, therapy forums, even a random panel at Comic-Con. And yet, something gnawed at me. I realized I had become the symbol people projected onto the quirky, brave creator who turned pain into profit. But the real me, I was just trying to stay human. Because here's what no one tells you. When your pain becomes marketable, you start questioning whether you're allowed to heal. If people love you because you're broken, what happens if you get better? Will they still want the art? Will they still see you? That fear clung to me even as success wrapped itself around my life. Then the letter came. Not a DM, not an email, an actual letter. Blue envelope, slightly torn edges my name in careful cursive. Inside was a folded page, the pencil smudged at the corners. The kind of handwriting that spoke of trembling hands. Hi, I don't know if you'll read this, but thank you. I bought your Morty sticker, the one that says, "I'm tired, not lazy." I stuck it to my laptop right before my boss fired me. He said I was too soft. But that sticker reminded me I wasn't soft, I was sensitive. And that's not weakness. Now I'm working in a nonprofit where I get to feel things and not be ashamed of them. Thank you for giving me a little voice when I'd lost mine. I didn't know this person's name, but I knew their pain. I knew it like muscle memory. And reading that letter, I felt a shift inside me. I realized, maybe my art didn't just save me. Maybe it gave other people permission to be themselves. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment surrounded by piles of new merchandise and samples from Target's next seasonal release. None of it felt alive. I missed the mess, the community, the late-night DMs from strangers showing me their own little blob monsters. And then, like lightning cracking open the sky, an idea hit me. Not a product, a place. A home for the strange, soft, scared creatives who didn't know where they belonged. I grabbed my phone and typed the name as fast as it came to me, the Scribble House. The next morning, I posted a caption with a sketch of a crooked little house held up by mismatched legs. One day, I'm gonna open a real place where people can draw with tears in their eyes, sit in quiet rooms and breathe and talk about sadness without flinching. Call it what you want. I'm calling it the Scribble House. Ugly feelings make beautiful things. I didn't expect much. By noon, the post had 120,000 likes. By the weekend, someone had tagged me in a GoFundMe they made themselves, begging me to make it real. So I did. I signed a lease on an old storefront in a quiet neighborhood. White brick, big windows, faded lettering on the door that once said "Dry Cleaners." We ripped out the counters, repainted the walls. I set up cozy corners with beanbags and donated couches. One wall was painted chalkboard black, and every person who walked in was invited to scribble something, anything, onto it. The very first mark, a child's drawing of a sad toaster. Underneath, "He just wants to warm bread, but he's so tired." I left it there for months. We hosted zine-making nights, sticker swaps, drawing sessions where no one had to talk. We laughed, we cried, we belonged. I met a woman in her 60s who used to be a courtroom sketch artist. Now she draws potatoes with eyes and calls them emotional spuds. A 15-year-old homeschooled boy drew comics about a possum that only speaks in Shakespeare quotes. A single dad dropped off his daughter for every workshop and later joined in making magnets of angry vegetables. It wasn't about being good at art. It was about having permission to exist in color. One day, Megan walked in. I didn't recognize her at first. She looked smaller. Not physically, but emotionally, like someone who had been trying to outrun herself for years and finally stopped. She carried a dusty shoebox. Inside, my old sketchbooks. I hadn't seen them since I left Mom's house. "I found them behind the boiler," she said quietly. "I figured you'd want them back." She lingered near the wall of scribbles, her eyes lingering on a quote someone had written. "My weird saved me. Maybe yours will too." "I was cruel to you," she finally said. "I'm sorry." It wasn't dramatic. No tearful hug. No montage. Just honesty. And maybe that was enough. That night, I flipped through one of the sketchbooks. Page after page of awkward, shaky lines, mushrooms with fangs, hearts with arms, and on one torn page dated when I was 16 was the very first version of Morty. The caption beneath read, "You'll laugh at me now, but one day, you'll pay to see me." I didn't laugh. I wept. Because she, that scared, stubborn version of me, was right, and I owed her everything. I used to think the hardest part was surviving, but I was wrong. The hardest part is deciding what kind of legacy you want to leave behind after you've survived. Because success, real success, the kind that reaches people, that lives beyond your name, isn't about numbers. It's about meaning. And meaning isn't born from strategy. It's born from suffering, reflection, and finally, intention. The Scribble House grew faster than I imagined. People flew in from other states just to attend a silent doodle night. We hosted grief journaling workshops, trauma-informed creativity circles, even a birthday party for a woman turning 35 who said she'd never celebrated her birthday before. I watched people transform. They came in bent over, afraid of their own shadows. They left with rainbow paint on their cheeks, laughing like they hadn't in years. The walls became a living archive, hundreds of voices overlapping like one massive confession disguised as art. One that said, "Me too." I felt that. I'm still here. Then came the email. Subject line, Target X, Scribble House, Let's Talk expansion. I blinked. Read it twice. They wanted a full in-store collaboration and exclusive collection, with a portion of profits funneled directly into mental health access programs tied to art education. It was exactly what I'd wished someone would offer when I was 19 and crying in a walk-in freezer because my drawings weren't useful. Now they were powerful. The night before the pitch meeting, I didn't sleep. Not from nerves, but from clarity. This was no longer just my story. It was ours. The kid with anxiety who made blob stickers to survive homeroom. The war veteran who mailed us a sketch of a crooked house with "I'm safe now" scribbled underneath. The 72-year-old retired teacher who held her granddaughter's hand and said, "We're going to make zines together now." All of them were part of this, and I had to protect what we built. At the meeting, their team laid out everything: brand extensions, pop-up stores, potential animated shorts, maybe even a series. And I listened. But then I leaned forward. "I need you to understand," I said, calm but certain. "This isn't just a product line. This is a safe space wrapped in whimsy. If you strip the pain out of it, the heart dies." They looked surprised, then respectful. To their credit, they didn't flinch. "We don't want to dilute it. We want to elevate it." They kept the wall scribbles. They kept Morty weird. They let me write every back-of-pack message by hand. And I made sure the very first tag on every item said, "This is for the kid who thought their weirdness was worthless." When the Scribble House line launched in stores, I stood in the aisle and watched a mother hand her daughter a plush version of Sad Broccoli. The little girl read the tag and whispered, "He looks like me when I'm scared." The mom smiled and said, "Then he's perfect." I nearly broke down in the soup aisle. But not everything was warm and soft. With visibility came judgment. Some accused me of romanticizing mental illness. Others called it millennial trauma branding. One woman even DM'd, "Why would anyone want to celebrate sadness?" At first I wanted to fight back, to scream, "You don't get it. You've never been there." But instead I let the work speak. Because for every angry message there were 20 more that said, "Your character made my son smile for the first time in weeks." My therapy group uses your zine prompts. I finally told my mom I was depressed, and she listened. I stopped measuring worth in likes. I measured it in impact. And I remembered something my younger self once wrote in the corner of a sketchbook. "If one person feels less alone because of this, then it's not ridiculous." Then something happened I never expected. My mom showed up. Not to the store, to my apartment. No warning, No flowers. Just her holding a box of ginger tea and a nervous smile. I saw your interview, she said, sitting on the edge of my couch like it might reject her. And I realized I didn't know you at all. I stayed quiet. She continued, "You're extraordinary, Madison. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I think I was afraid. Afraid that if I believed in your dream, and it didn't work, I'd lose you to disappointment. But I think I lost you anyway." There was nothing dramatic in the room, no music swelling, no hugs. Just two women, one carrying guilt, the other not sure what to do with forgiveness. "I can't go back," she said, eyes glassy, "but I'd like to visit the Scribble house sometime, if you'll let me." I nodded. Not because everything was okay, but because sometimes healing doesn't need permission. It just needs a door left open. I spent that night drawing again, not for content, not for merch, but for me. I sketched a girl sitting on a couch wrapped in a giant quilt made of old sketch pages. On her lap was Morty smiling crookedly. Behind her, a scribble house glowing in the distance. And beneath it all, I wrote, "She finally came home." Not to a place, but to herself. People think the best part of success is the applause, the awards, the press, the numbers that go up. But it's not. The best part is silence. The moment you sit in your favorite chair, tea in hand, and realize you no longer have to prove yourself to anyone. Not your mother, not your ex-boss, not even that little voice in your own head whispering, "You're not enough." Because now, you know you are. The Scribble House was now a national name. We had partnerships with mental health organizations, sold out classes, feature write-ups in major magazines. We were even invited to speak at conferences about art therapy and trauma-informed spaces. I started bringing in other artists, storytellers, poets, people who were overlooked for being too weird, too emotional, or too raw. In other words, people like me. We didn't make perfect things. We made honest things. And somehow, that honesty turned into revenue. Revenue turned into a movement. And the movement felt like a kind of revolution. Then I got the invitation. TED Women. They wanted me to speak. Not as an artist, not as an entrepreneur, but as a witness to the power of storytelling through pain. I remember standing backstage, the mic trembling slightly in my hand. I looked out at the sea of women, teachers, survivors, mothers, CEOs, and I told them the truth. That once, a long time ago, I cried in a walk-in freezer. That I begged the universe to make me more useful. That I wanted to trade my scribbles for spreadsheets because they seemed safer. And that I'm glad I didn't. Because somewhere along the way, I learned you don't have to be useful to be worthy. You just have to be true. When I walked off stage, a woman about 60 years old stopped me. She had silver hair pulled back tight like she'd spent decades trying to look professional. She was crying. "I haven't painted since I was 19, she whispered. "Thank you for giving me permission to start again." I held her hand. And for a second, we were both 19 again, but this time brave. Around that time, I decided to revisit something I hadn't looked at in years. My old art school rejection letter. It was still folded into that same journal where I'd drawn Morty for the first time. The letter hadn't changed. Still formal. Still sharp. Still cold. But I had changed. Now I looked at it with a smile. Because they were right. I didn't fit their mold. But that's because I wasn't made to fit in. I was made to redesign the whole blueprint. With the company now stable and thriving, I started thinking about something I'd avoided for years. What next? I didn't want to just scale. I didn't want 1,000 locations. I wanted depth, not breadth. So I created a grant program, the Scribble Seed. It was designed for kids who, like me, were told their creativity was a waste of time. We gave them materials, mentors, a platform. Some made comics about grief. Others designed plushies for kids in foster care. One girl animated her therapy sessions and turned them into YouTube shorts with millions of views. I sat front row at their showcases, teary-eyed, watching the next generation reclaim their weirdness with pride. My own days grew quieter. I didn't crave the spotlight anymore. Most days I wore oversized sweaters, drank cold brew out of a paint-splattered mug, and doodled just for myself. Morty evolved too. He had a family now, anxious onion, sleepy celery, and furious fennel. Each one born from an emotion I used to be ashamed of. But now they were celebrated. Printed on lunchboxes, projected in therapy centers, used as tools for expression in homes and classrooms. Every time I saw a child hug Morty to their chest, I felt that original version of me, scared, ashamed, hiding behind freezer doors, finally breathe. One night I got a voicemail. It was from Liza, my old coworker from the packaging company. Madison, I just saw your store in Boston. The sidewalk chalk made me cry. I still remember your little sketchbook. I'm so glad the world finally sees what I always saw. I hadn't spoken to her in years. But that message, that meant more than the magazine covers, the interviews, the followers, because it came from someone who saw me when no one else did. I decided to write a book, not a memoir. A sketchbook just like the ones I used to carry, only this time filled with notes to the reader. Notes like, your softness is not a liability, it's an ecosystem. The opposite of ridiculous is real. If you feel too much, it means you're alive. Keep going. When it published, a girl wrote to me from Ohio. She said she kept the book under her pillow and wrote her own secrets in the margins. I don't want to be invisible anymore, she said. And I think, I don't have to be. That's when I realized, this brand isn't about me. It never was. It's about every person who needed permission to exist, as they are messy, sensitive, unsure, dreaming. And finally heard someone whisper, you're not alone. Your scribbles are sacred. When my daughter came home from college for winter break, she walked into the studio wide-eyed. She hadn't been home since the Scribble house went viral. Back when she left, we were barely surviving. Now the walls were covered in art. The house smelled like fresh paint and cinnamon. And I for once looked like someone not trying to hold it together, but someone rooted. She ran her fingers along the shelves of sketchbooks, the old tea kettle, the vintage Morty plush. You did it, she said softly. I always knew you would. I almost laughed. You hated Morty. I was scared, she admitted. You were always different. Everyone else's mom worked jobs they hated. You were building something invisible. I didn't understand it. I stood there looking at my daughter, this woman now, and saw myself reflected back. The years I spent afraid, ashamed, understood by no one, including her. Until now. Later that night, we sat in the living room, a fire crackling. She pulled out her laptop. Can I show you something, she asked? I nodded. She opened a folder titled Dream Stuff. Inside were pages of poems, some angry, some tender, some clearly written during her high school years, dark, brittle, searching. I started writing these because of Morty, she said. I blinked, stunned. What, back then? I hated that you were different, but I saw you keep going anyway. And one night I took one of your sketchbooks into my room. I read what you wrote. About sadness being a companion. About drawing your fear to shrink it. I started writing to shrink mine. I couldn't hold back the tears. Because I had spent so long thinking I'd lost her. That she resented me. That my own daughter thought I was a failure. But the truth was simpler and more beautiful. She saw me. Just not in the moment. In hindsight. And hindsight has the power to heal things even time cannot. 2 weeks later, we started a new division at the Scribble House Echo Pages. It was her idea. A creative publishing line for young writers, especially those from homes where art wasn't supported. We printed pocket poetry books, each one illustrated by artists from our grant program. The first one was titled, My Mother Raised a Pen. She never said it was about me. But I knew. It ended with a line that felt like closure. She didn't plant flowers, but she watered every word until I bloomed in ink. Of course, not everyone from my past celebrated. My ex called once. I hadn't spoken to him in years. He'd heard about the Scribble house through a colleague. "You were always dramatic," he started, but I guess that paid off. I stayed silent. He continued. "I'm just surprised you stuck with something long enough. Guess the Scribbles weren't so ridiculous after all." I still remember how I felt back when he said those words, ridiculous scribbles, like they carried all the weight of my failure. Now they just felt hollow. "I hope you find something that makes you feel seen," I said. Then I hung up. Not out of bitterness, but because closure isn't about changing their view of you. It's about releasing your view of them. We expanded our team, started school partnerships, launched an app where kids could scribble out their emotions in real time, share them anonymously, and connect with mentors. One child, 8 years old, sent in a crayon drawing of Morty with a speech bubble that read, "It's okay to be sad. Just don't eat the glue." I laughed so hard I cried. It was better than any ad campaign I could have dreamed of, because it meant the message was alive, and more importantly, understood. Some nights I still wake up in a cold sweat. The old anxiety, the frozen freezer air, the feeling that everything could fall apart again. But then I walk through my house. I see the warmth, the mess, the laughter. I look at my walls covered in scribbles. And I remember, even when life doesn't make sense, you can still make something out of it. A few weeks before my 45th birthday, we hosted a celebration at the original studio. I walked in and saw a crowd of familiar faces: students, staff, strangers. Even Liza showed up with a homemade Morty cupcake. My daughter stood beside me. "Do you know what today is?" she asked. "My birthday." "No. It's the anniversary of the day you left that job." I blinked. She pulled out a tiny box. Inside was a locket with a tiny scribble etched into the silver. "Your first Morty," she said. My hands shook. The crowd clapped. I felt time folding in on itself, the freezer girl and the founder finally existing in the same space. Whole. That night I stood alone in the backyard, looking at the stars. And I whispered, not to anyone in particular, "I forgive you. For doubting. For delaying. For despairing." Because in the end it all became part of the art. Even the ugliest lines. Even the unfinished sketches. They all belonged to the story. Success has a strange echo. It fills rooms that were once silent. It warms spaces that used to ache with emptiness. But it also calls back voices you thought you'd buried. After the anniversary celebration, I began receiving emails from people I hadn't spoken to in decades. Some congratulated me. Others asked for favors. A few wanted to reconnect. But one stood out. Mrs. Caldwell. My former boss from the packaging company, the one who once mocked my sketches and told me not to embarrass the department. Her email subject line read, "A humble request." I opened it expecting bitterness or veiled condescension. Instead, I read, "Madison, I owe you an apology." I don't expect a reply, but I saw the segment about the Scribble House on Channel 8. And I cried. Not out of envy, but because I remember how carelessly I spoke to you all those years ago. I had no idea I was standing in the presence of someone extraordinary. I was so focused on boxes that I never saw the artist inside one. I sat with that for a long time. Not because I needed her apology, but because sometimes people grow, and when they do, it's not your job to punish them for who they used to be. I replied with 2 sentences. "Thank you. May we all keep unboxing each other." She never responded, and that felt right. Meanwhile, the Scribble House had grown into something much bigger than me. We had a staff of 12, a scholarship program, a quarterly illustrated zine that sold out every issue. We even hosted a storytelling tent at the state fair. Kids could sit inside and share what they scribbled through. One child spoke about his father leaving, another about losing her dog. But the most unforgettable one, a boy named Adam, no older than 7, said, "I don't talk a lot. But when I draw Morty, I feel like I'm not alone." That was it. That one sentence made every night of hunger worth it. Every time I'd been laughed at. Every sketchbook thrown away. Because I hadn't just created a character. I'd given kids a way to process what their mouths couldn't say. But with growth comes pressure. Investors began circling. Some pitched ideas I hated, turn Morty into an NFT collection, license his image for snack packaging, sell fast-track creative courses for hundreds of dollars. One man said, "Your brand has emotional capital. You're not monetizing that properly." I told him, "That's because I'm not in the business of extraction. I'm in the business of expression." He left confused, and I left certain. There would be no shortcut to this mission. We would grow, yes, but on our terms. No overproduction, no diluted message, just story, and scribbles, and soul. I hired 2 young illustrators, both formerly homeless teens who used to draw on cardboard panels behind the library. Now they lead our weekend workshops. I watched one of them show a group of 5-year-olds how to scribble your monster, then name it something silly. One girl drew a black cloud and named it toothpaste. They all burst out laughing. Healing disguised as play, art disguised as survival. This was what I had dreamed of, and it was real. One night I was locking up the studio when I found something taped to the door. It was a page from one of our own coloring books, colored in thick crayon, written in shaky kid handwriting, "Dear Miss Madison." My mom says I'm weird, but Morty says I'm magic. I stared at it for a long time, not crying, just breathing in the full circle of it all. I had once been that kid. Now I was the mirror they could see themselves in. That evening, I lit a candle and opened my oldest sketchbook. Page 1, a lopsided Morty, a tear-stained edge. Beneath it, I'd once written, "If no one sees me, at least this page will." Now thousands did. But more importantly, I saw myself. Clearly, finally, without apology. It started like any other day, sunlight slicing through the curtains, Morty mugs clinking in the dish rack, and a warm hum of music playing in the background. But there was a tension in the air I couldn't name yet. That morning, we were hosting our biggest event yet, the first Scribble Summit. A full-day gathering of artists, educators, parents, and children, all connected by the simple magic of imperfect lines and bold imagination. The mayor was scheduled to attend. There would be live mural painting, a Morty puppet show, and a keynote from me. But something strange happened on my way to the studio. I saw my daughter, Jenna, not on the sidewalk, not coming toward me, but on a massive poster pinned to a streetlight. It read, "Color Outside the Lies, a new exhibit by Jenna Keene, former daughter of Madison Keene." I stopped breathing. Former daughter. The phrase hit me like a stone. I hadn't spoken to her in over 4 years, not since the last Thanksgiving when she told me I had chosen doodles over dignity and walked out of my life. Back then, she was still in law school, still obsessed with legacy, still furious that I hadn't taken the promotion at the packaging firm just to seem stable. Now she was an artist. What? I stood in the studio that morning, surrounded by banners and smiles, but my mind was spinning. She hadn't reached out, hadn't called. And now her art exhibit was framed as a rebuke of me. I didn't cry. Not yet. But when I walked into the summit's main hall, something stopped me cold. The massive chalkboard installation, the one where visitors were supposed to write what scribbling meant to them, had already started to fill. Children had written, "Scribbling is dreaming. Scribbling is my voice." But tucked in the corner in adult handwriting, "Scribbling is betrayal when it becomes more important than your own blood." I knew it. It was her. She'd come early, left her mark, and vanished. I was scheduled to speak in 20 minutes. My assistant asked if I was ready. I nodded. Not because I felt ready, but because I knew what I needed to do. This wasn't just a brand anymore. It was my truth. And I wouldn't flinch now. I stepped up to the podium. The lights were hot. The room was packed. I took a deep breath. My name is Madison Keene, I began. And I used to believe that success meant being accepted. There was a pause. People leaned in. But I've learned that success is really about becoming someone you can stand to live with, even when others walk away. A hush fell over the crowd. I glanced at the chalkboard again. That bitter scribble in the corner. I've lost people in this journey. Some by accident, some by choice. Some because I refused to be smaller than I was meant to be. I kept my voice steady. Not defensive, just honest. And yes, some call what I do ridiculous still. Some believe I chose cartoons over connection. But they miss the point entirely. I held up a drawing, one of Morty's earliest forms. This isn't a cartoon. This is survival in ink. This is joy with sharp teeth. This is a scream disguised as laughter. And this is my way back to myself. The room broke into applause, not thunderous, but warm, genuine. A few parents were crying. One boy stood and shouted, "Morty saved my brain." Laughter rippled. So did I. After the speech, I found a folded piece of paper slipped under the display table. No name, just Morty drawn in charcoal. And beneath it, 2 words I see. My hands trembled. It was her. Jenna had been there, heard it all. Maybe she wasn't ready to talk. But she saw me now. And for the first time, she'd responded not with arguments, but with art. A silent white flag. Not forgiveness, but recognition. That was enough for now. Back home that night, I lit another candle. Not out of ritual, but reverence. I placed Jenna's Morty drawing beside my first one. 2 decades, 2 different hands, same soul. My story hadn't just healed strangers, it had started to pull my own family thread by thread back into the weave. It was a quiet Sunday evening when I realized I didn't feel the need to explain myself anymore. No need to justify the messy beginnings, no desire to clean up the contradictions in my story. No guilt for having chosen my path over someone else's approval. The house smelled faintly of vanilla and ink. The studio light was off. Morty rested in a hand-sculpted ceramic frame newly added to a wall of childhood scribbles that had once been dismissed as nonsense. I sat alone with a cup of tea, and I felt full. Not with pride, not with vindication, just a quiet fullness, like a story finally laid down after years of pacing. The brand had grown beyond anything I ever dreamed. Morty now had a global licensing deal with children's therapy centers. A documentary about the origins of the character was in post-production, and for the first time in my life, I had more offers than I knew what to do with. But here's the truth I never expected. The best part of the journey wasn't the money, or the recognition, or even the redemption. It was the day Jenna showed up at my door. She didn't bring flowers. She didn't come with apologies. She just stood there in her gray coat hair soaked with rain and whispered, "I never knew it hurt you that much." I nodded. Because what do you say to that? We sat on the floor of my living room drinking cocoa like 2 strangers who once shared a lifetime. I showed her the very first scribble, the one I drew in the margins of a medical bill. And I said, "You didn't lose a mother to Morty. You gained one because of him." She stared at it for a long time, and then quietly she reached into her coat and pulled out a sketch pad. "I've been drawing dreams I don't tell anyone about," she said. That's when I knew healing had begun. Not loud, not dramatic, just 2 women tracing a broken line back to something whole. So, what did I learn? I learned that some of the ugliest beginnings are secretly miracles in disguise, that the things people call ridiculous are often the very things that keep us breathing, and that the world will try to erase your voice, especially if it's drawn in crayon or stitched in silence. But when you keep going, when you hold the pen, when you believe in your own scribble, it can become a map home. And to you watching this, maybe you've been told your idea is stupid. Maybe your creativity has been mocked. Or your family stopped calling because you dared to want something different. To you, I say, keep scribbling. Because somewhere in the chaos of your lines is the beginning of something powerful, something only you can bring to life. If this story touched something in you, please share it, or leave a comment below with your own moment of being underestimated. Let's make space for each other's truth. And don't forget to subscribe to Grace's Truth, where stories like this come alive. Because sometimes the most ridiculous stories are the ones that save us.